Hi, this is Tom Lippincott, and welcome to another episode of Modern Jazz Noise. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite reverb pedals of all time, the Strymon BigSky. I've had a couple of requests to talk about the parameters that I use for my LXP-1 emulation. So we're going to be talking about that, and just also some other ways that I use the pedal, and maybe a few other cool sounds that it can make. So here we go. Here we are with my pedal board, and today we're concentrating on the BigSky. So we'll be talking about, I've had a couple people ask questions about the LXP-1 quote-unquote setting that I use. So I'm going to go through the details of that and then talk about some of the other stuff that I do, that some of the other presets that I've made, and then maybe talk a little bit about some of the other presets that I don't necessarily use on a daily basis, but there are some things that I do find useful for different recordings and so forth when I'm trying to get different sounds. First of all, one thing I should say about the BigSky is, even though I am kind of a reverb addict and I love reverb just in general, I am not somebody who's constantly tweaking and coming up with 10,000 different presets and, you know, uses a different sound on every song, on every gig or whatever. As much as I love reverb, I pretty much have just found a few presets that I really like. And because reverb is sort of like an always-on effect for me, I pretty much just stick with those settings for the most part, and then everything else is what changes on underneath that, kind of. But I'll talk about a few, you know, things that I do use for kind of special effects. So before we get into talking about the BigSky, let me just play you my completely unaffected tone with nothing in the pedal board engaged. And I'm running through, I'm running into Logic Pro, and I'm using a Vox style amplifier plugin, as well as an IR that is a speaker emulation from Celestion. And it was one that I just picked up pretty recently, and it does help add a little bit of extra realism. It's still, in my experience, not the same as playing through an actual amp in a room and hearing the way the sound waves bounce around off the walls and into your eardrums, but it definitely helps make it sound a little bit more of that kind of warm in a room sound. But anyway, so that's my basic tone. Now I've got my tone rolled off the way I would if I was playing like kind of a straight ahead jazz situation. And now I'll turn on the BigSky with my LXP-1 preset. So that's basically the LXP-1 sound that I have in the BigSky. It might be, you can hear that there's, when I play a short chord like that, you can really hear it. It's pretty prominent in the mix. Well, here's kind of I forget if I've talked about this in any of my other videos, but for sitting here alone in a room, that's probably a little much in terms of reverb just for everyday playing a standard like Emily, like I was just doing. So if I was just playing by myself in a room alone, I might actually bring the mix down a little lower than that. Let's see. and so forth. But if I'm playing some faster flurries of notes and I've got the mix up this high, it does tend to get in the way a little bit. Now, however, and this is one thing I wanted to point out, if I've never talked about this before, is in a gig situation, of course, it really depends because there are as many different situations as there are gigs. But most of the gigs that I do, I'm not playing in Carnegie Hall to a wrapped audience where you can hear a pin drop and it's the perfect acoustics. If that was the case, in the rare situation where I get to play like that, this might be a pretty similar kind of a thing where I'd want to turn the mix down. But in most of the clubs and so forth that I play in, where you're going to hear, cash registers, cars going by, people at the next table maybe are having a big conversation, whatever, or just the sound quality of the room itself isn't great. Maybe it's really boomy. You're playing with a drummer and the drums are kind of taking up a lot of sonic space. All that stuff can serve to sort of get in the way of hearing the decay of some reverb. So if I've got it set in more of this solo guitar friendly, I mean, that's still fairly prominent, but imagine if even if there was just like a drummer in the room playing with me and the drummer's cymbals were going, those reverb tails that you're hearing so easily right now would kind of disappear behind the sound of the cymbals and the drums. And what I find is I kind of need to use more reverb than I might normally do in a solo situation or maybe on a recording if I'm in a gig like that, because otherwise it just gets covered up and it's almost like, why even have reverb there in the first place, because you can't hear it. I've heard people say, oh, if you're playing in a really boomy room, you need to turn your reverb down because it's going to make it more muddy sounding. But contrary to what you might think, my experience has been almost the opposite, that if I'm playing in a really adverse sounding situation and I want to actually be able to hear the reverb that I'm using and not just have it completely disappear and sound like it's not even there, I've got to turn it up a little bit higher in the mix than I might normally if I was at home or on a recording. So anyway, just a little, observation. And I'm not trying to say that's how everybody should do it. I know that, again, I'm kind of a reverb addict and I tend to use it a lot. I love the sound of reverb, and maybe some people might hear my sound live and say, oh, that's too much reverb, I don't like that. I don't know. But I mean, that's the sound that I hear in my head and that I want to hear when I'm playing live. Okay, anyway. So now let's talk a little bit about this specific preset on the LXP-1. So, on the BigSky that I'm emulating the LXP-1. For anyone who has seen some of my previous videos, you may have seen the one where I was doing the reverb smackdown, kind of comparing the Red Panda context with reverb units from Universal Audio and Source Audio, and I was comparing all three of them to my vintage LXP-1 from Lexicon, which has always been my favorite reverb for jazz playing. And I was basically trying to see which one of those three pedals I could get to sound the closest to the LXP-1. And in subsequent videos, people have sometimes asked me questions, well, okay, I see your pedal board now and I don't see the Red Panda context on it. I thought you picked that one and we're going to be using it. Well, what you may have missed, if you were one of the people that asked that question, is the purpose of that comparison was to find a reverb pedal that could replace my LXP-1 for small gigs. Up until that point, I had been bringing my LXP-1 and a delay pedal for small gigs where I didn't want to have to bring my pedal board. I knew I wasn't going to need all the fancy stuff, and I just wanted some basic reverb and delay. So I was looking for a pedal that had a pretty decent LXP-1 emulation and had delay. And in the end, I ended up choosing the Red Panda context as my go-to pedal. And in subsequent last year or so that I've been using it on small gigs, I love it. It works great. I love the way it sounds. However, on this pedal board for some years now, I've had the Strymon BigSky, and this is by far my favorite reverb pedal that I've ever played through. even more than the LXP-1, simply because of the versatility of it. But one of the very first things I did when I got the BigSky is I A/B'd the BigSky with the LXP-1, just like I did on that other comparison video, although this was pre-Modern Jazz Noise. And I basically created a preset on the BigSky that got as close as I could find to the sound of the dark hall algorithm on the Lexicon LXP-1. So that's what I have right here. Now you'll see that it says LXP-1T. What I did is, here you can see it says TST, but that's an abbreviation for test. I basically duplicated my main LXP-1 patch and called it LXP-1 test, just so that when I was making this video, I didn't, do something stupid and accidentally write over it and change the settings and lose that forever. I'm not smart enough to have backed up all my stuff, via MIDI. So, but then again, I mean, I have everything written down, and if I ever do lose my LXP-1 preset or whatever, I can probably recreate it fairly easily. So you kind of heard what the preset sounds like and the different levels of mix. Actually, just one thing that I'll do before we get into the different settings is just turn the mix way up so you can really hear the reverb. Now, of course, this is, there's almost no situation in the real world where I would use this sound, but it's just so you can really obviously hear what the tail of that reverb sounds like. Okay, now I'll go back to the preset amount. Okay, so now each one of these knobs, starting here with the decay, pre-delay, mix, tone, parameter 1, parameter 2, modulation, is set to adjust a certain setting, and in most cases it says what it is: decay, pre-delay, mix, tone. Parameter 1 and parameter 2 are wildcard knobs that can be assigned to whatever, and most of the factory presets, if not all, have settings within the preset that they think most people would probably want to have at their fingertips, so they've assigned them. And in this case, the LXP-1 has the low EQ for the reverb on this parameter 1, and then the mid EQ on this parameter 2. And if I'm not mistaken, right now, all of the knobs that you see are basically tuned to what the preset dictates. So in other words, if I take this pre-delay knob and I move it, you'll see that that light just turned orange. If I move it anywhere, it stays orange, but if I move it to this one spot, it turns green. And the green means this is the spot where the preset was saved. So this pre-delay amount is like this. Again, put some... And I can make the pre-delay go quite a bit longer like this. Right? It's ridiculous how long it takes for it to kick in. Even that is longer than, I would be able to really make use of. Whereas if I put it all the way down, there's almost no time between when I hit the note and when the reverb starts. And of course, as I outlined in my previous video, one of the things I loved about the LXP-1 is the pre-delay control and the character of when the reverb comes in. It kind of fades in beautifully. And that's what this one does too. There's not this big, sudden, from silence to tons of reverb. It fades in really gently, which sounds very musical to me. Sounds like a real space would do. Whereas one of my old pedals, the Eventide Space, the pre-delay was stuck so that when the reverb came on, it came on all at once with no fade in, and it was really annoying. It sounded almost more like an echo or a delay than reverb if you set any amount of pre-delay. Okay, so that's where my pre-delay is set. The mix, of course, is about here on the preset. And as I mentioned, this is probably like live setting. Tone, which there's all the way up. You can just hear it. Here, I'll put the mix up again. and here's as dark as it gets. Right? And then, of course, where I have is kind of right in the middle. And then you can further tailor the tone of the reverb. And now, just in case anyone's unclear about this, all three of these have nothing to do with the dry signal. If I can radically change them and my dry signal will stay exactly the same, unchanged. It's just the quality of the reverb tail that gets the tone treatment. So this parameter 1 is going to be low end, and as you can see, you can bring it down. It's not, doesn't give you a number, but it just shows plus and minus, and then here's like right in the middle, and then here's all the way up. And so to get to where I am on the preset, it's a little bit higher than at Unity, I guess you would say. And then whereas on the mids, I put the mid control quite a bit, almost all the way, actually all the way up. Here's if I bring it. To me, that was a little too dark, and so I guess I used that mid to. Again, I don't remember exactly because it's been a few years since I did this, but I was just trying all these settings and then comparing them to that glorious LXP-1 algorithm that I had, and just messing with the knobs until I came as close as I could. And then finally we have the modulation, which gives like a chorus kind of effect to, again, not to the dry signal, but just to the reverb. I personally hate the sound of chorus on a guitar signal, but put it on delay or reverb and it sounds really cool. So here's with it all the way up. You can really hear that pitch warbliness of the reverb as it trails off. And then none at all. And then where I have it set, enough where you can tell it's there. Just barely. Okay, so that's basically my preset. Now, the one thing that we haven't talked about yet is decay. Decay does work the same way as these others, but there's one thing about this that I find a little bit annoying, is if I touch this knob, it's going to immediately change the setting, and you're going to see on the LED screen, oh, there's the setting that it's on. But wait a minute, where was it for the preset? I have no idea. And until I figured this out, I was kind of like, what the hell? How do I know where I had it set in the preset? So here's the way this is going to work. If I want to see what the preset is for the decay, I have to actually hit this type button, not move it this way, but I have to press it. And that's going to show me where the decay is for this preset. Doesn't work the same way. If I move it around, you don't see this green light change at all. So, but and now I've completely lost it, right? That's one thing that I find kind of annoying about it. I happen to remember that it was 2.07. So if I go back to it, I get there. That's where I had it. But I've got the possibility of all the way down to 500 milliseconds, and then all the way to almost infinite. And of course, that's very atmospheric. Wouldn't use it to play a standard, certainly. Okay, so back to normal. All right, so that is one kind of weird, quirky thing about the BigSky that I find a little bit annoying. And also, when I first had this pedal, I would accidentally hit this button on a gig and be like, oh, I can't see what preset I'm on. Okay, I'll change to a different preset. Oh, now I still can't see what preset it is. And all you have to do is hit this button again and it goes back to the title. Oh, something happened there. Let's see. I must have changed one of the settings somehow. Okay, but anyway, so everything's back to normal. It's now on the preset. And now you can see exactly where these knobs are. So anybody who wanted to know what my settings are for my LXP-1, this is them. Now we can also look at them numerically by clicking on the value button, and it says params, which is parameters. Now I can scroll through low end. I click on it and it'll show me what the low end is. So there it is. I don't know what you would call that number wise, but it's a little above 0. You know, it's like minus and plus. So maybe plus, if you considered plus to be 10 and minus 10, it's maybe on 1, you know. Okay, scroll now to mid, and you can see, of course, that it's all the way up to 10, if you want to call it that. Scroll over to size. This is one that wasn't in any assigned to any of these knobs, and surprisingly, I use the arena size. There's two sizes in the hall. There's concert, which you would think, okay, if I'm trying to emulate the sound of a concert hall, I would use the concert, but I actually ended up liking this, oh, sorry, the arena sound. You can hear right away that it's a longer decay time anyway. But again, A-Bing it with the LXP-1, I found this sound sounded closer, even if I adjust the decay so that, you know, it's similar on the concert, like maybe like that. Oh, that actually sounds kind of cool. But let's see, back to here, and then size back to arena, and back to 207. Okay, then I take it, let's see, parameter size boost. That you can actually boost the dry signal, and I never do. I just leave it at 0, but they say in the manual that if you want to have one particular preset that's like for solos or something, you can make it louder. I don't really see the utility of that, since they have a volume pedal anyway. Okay, next we have persist, which just means it's on. That means that if you switch to another preset, the reverb, or no, I'm sorry, if you turn it off, the reverb tail continues. That's really never a issue for me. I just had it on just for the hell of it, but I almost never would turn off the reverb while I'm mid, you know, song, because like I said, I pretty much always leave the reverb on anyway. Hold function is set to infinite, which again, I don't really ever use. I think with this particular pedal, you'd have to have some kind of an expression pedal hooked up to it, and I've never done that. I understand that the new version of the BigSky has one button dedicated as an infinite hold button, which some people love and some people hate, and that means you no longer have 3 presets at your fingertips. You only have 2, and then one's dedicated infinite repeat button. And that's one of the reasons why I haven't made the leap and tried out the new BigSky. It does have some pretty exciting new features that look interesting, but I'm going to stick with this one because it's got the 3 presets, and I'll explain about that a little bit more. The name, of course, now you can edit the name here. I won't get into that. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then finally, I've got expression pedal settings off. Go into set expression pedal for heel and toe, and then I think that's it. And then for some reason, backtracking here is okay. I guess it's working okay, but well, there we go. Now it's kind of, see, I turn it a bunch, and it takes a long time for it to go backward to another parameter. I don't know whether there's something wrong with this control or whether that's just the way it is. But anyway, okay, so now we're back home. So that's basically my hall setting, the LXP-1, that I use, you know, in everyday settings. Now let's talk about a couple of other presets that I use. Okay, I've taken you back to my regular LXP-1 setting, not the test one, and it's exactly the same as the one we just went through. So all of these knobs should be set to exactly where this is. Now I've got 2 other presets in this bank, which is just bank 0, that I use all the time. The next one I call Big Verb, and you can see that I'm using a different type, which is the Bloom setting. And this is a really cool algorithm. It says in the literature that it was meant to emulate some 90s reverb units that would sort of build up the reverb sound later after the reverb starts, which is also a way to it's sort of like the way a pre-delay works, where if you're playing a bunch of fast stuff, it might keep the reverb from overpowering what you're playing. And I just really love the way this reverb sounds for big stuff. Now, I use it for a little different kind of a situation than I would if I was playing jazz, playing a standard, traditional kind of sound. If I'm playing more of a pop-ish sound, I'll turn on these pedals. I've got the exotic compressor, the EP booster, which is all the way down to 0. It's not boosting the signal hardly at all. It's just adding a subtle little EQ that I like. And then the blues mood, which is all the way to 0 gain. Now, I'll even bring this, let it overdrive a little bit more. Yeah, that's actually kind of nice. I've got a tune called Hurricane Song that I use this setting. So that's kind of the kind of setting, the vibe or the style that I might use this sound for, kind of ballady and maybe more pop oriented, not so much, swing feel playing, standards or whatever. I don't remember exactly because it's been a long time since I made this preset, but I think I basically based it on one of the factory presets and maybe tweaked it a tiny little bit, but probably not that much. But I'll take you through the parameters. Low end, just a little bit higher, just like the LXP-1. Length is set there, so that's one of the specific settings for this algorithm, is just this length thing. It's just a visual graphic thing. So turn it. That's about where I have it set. If I turn it way up, it's going to sustain a lot longer, of course. Feedback, I have it set to nothing. You can hear it shift as it changes, but that doesn't happen once you get it set. Boost, of course, again, I set to 0. Persist is, again, the tails thing. Hold set to infinite, but I never use that anyway. Okay, so, and then let's look at some of the other stuff. Decay is set to 4.90 seconds. Now, pre-delay. Pre-delay is set pretty low. It sounds like it takes a while to build up, but I guess the bloom setting, that's the vibe anyway, so the pre-delay sort of, is not that necessary, I guess. Mix, let's see, where have I got it right about here. Get if I turn it up higher so you can hear that kind of rich decay. I don't know, it just sounds like, you're out in the universe or something. Very symphonic kind of sounding, right? All right, tone is right there. Parameter 1, there's my low end, set to there. Length, set to there. Modulation, right about medium, just like it was before. So a lot of these settings you'll see are pretty similar to the LXP-1 preset I had. I think I probably did go through and kind of, try to set a lot of the settings to be similar so it wouldn't be super different from the LXP-1 sound. I would say 90% of the time I've got it on one of these two presets. However, number 3 is kind of a special effect one. Nimbus, and this is, I'm almost sure, literally just one of the presets, and I have the mix turned up pretty high. Now you'll see this is the cloud algorithm, which is another one of these real ethereal sounding algorithms. I don't know exactly technically what the difference would be between Bloom and cloud, but kind of sounds like you're up in the clouds to me. And of course, it would be completely pointless to try to play a regular song like, you know, a fast melody or whatever, a chord progression with this sound. But I use this mostly at the very end of a song if I want to get a big chord, or maybe for a real spacey rubato intro. Something like that, and then, you know, switch to the next preset. And, you know, go into the tune from there. So that's basically it. I'll show you what some of the parameters are for this if anyone's curious. Low end is similar to the other ones. Diffusion, that's set to just medium, I guess. Diffusion is related to decay, but it also has to do with how spread the reflections are, I think. And it just gives you a bigger sound with a higher value. Boost, persist, hold, and so forth, all the regular ones. Okay, so again, get us back to the preset. Tone is, where is it here? Oh, close to, I don't know, like 66%, 2/3 of the way. Low end is right where it was on the other presets. Diffusion, where is it here? Right there, about 6, or no, 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, something like that. Then modulation is right there. So that's pretty much the Nimbus sound. All right, now, in recent times, this may sound like a contradiction to everything I've said up until now about the LXP-1 sound. I was actually at a gig, I think it was a couple of years ago now, and the situation was the band played one set and then opened it up for a jam session. And one of my students actually came up and sat in, and he had bought a BigSky, I think, after hearing me play through one, and liked it. And he kind of plugged into my pedal board, and he kind of sheepishly looks at me and says, "Do you mind if I change the setting on the BigSky?" And I was like, okay. I knew that he had one and he knew how it worked and everything, and I wasn't worried he was going to overwrite one of my settings or whatever. And he ended up, I watched what he did. He went over to the Bloom setting and kind of created, just real quick and dirty, you know, created a reverb setting. It sounded really nice. It was kind of big and bold, but for whatever, I don't remember what tune he played, but it was a jazz tune and it worked pretty well. And it occurred to me that that Bloom thing, you know, it excels at kind of staying behind the notes that you play while still sounding pretty big. So I created a Bloom setting inspired by that. And actually, I typically tend to use this one in more of a straight ahead setting. So. Right? I mean, I'm kind of playing a ballady, you know, that's, I fall in love too easily. But, you know, if I play a little, it doesn't, you don't really hear reverb getting in the way. I've also got it pretty low in the mix. And I have a full disclosure here, in the last year or maybe even longer, I've been using this preset at home when I practice. I like the way it sounds, and you can hear it's pretty low in the mix too. And I've even gotten to, sometimes on gigs, I'll use this preset and just bring the mix up a little higher. There's where the preset is, so I'll maybe bring it up to here. McCoy Tyner's tune on the corner, and that's the kind of thing that I might play with this preset. It's kind of sloppy there because I haven't played it in a while. I guess that's why they call it the blues. Anyway, so that is actually the preset that I've also been using a fair amount, and I even, on this bank, I set the Nimbus sound for my, and then the big Verb sound. Again, with all the fairy dust added to it. So if I want, I can do a whole set or a gig just using this, this one bank. And like I said, I tend to be pretty conservative in a way with the reverb, because I really don't use more than just those 3 presets, and I like the fact that I've got them always at my toe tips, I guess you would say. Now before we leave, what I will do is run you through maybe a couple of other sounds that I really like on the BigSky and that I have used, not necessarily on gigs, but maybe in recording sessions or whatever. Here's one you'll see called Weird Science, and it's a shimmer. Most of you are probably already familiar with what a shimmer effect is, but it's basically, it's pitch shift applied to the reverb. So it sounds like this. And what we have here, if I just play one note, you can hear that it's like a 1/5 below and a 1/5 above the note that I'm playing. So that there's 2 different pitch shifts going on. And of course, again, this is kind of a special effect. Here's the chorale type. This one's called Articulate. And you can hear that it's sort of imitating the vocal formant that singers get in their throat, I guess you would say. I don't particularly find, I mean, it's like, oh, cool, but, you know, I can't imagine a situation where I would actually use that sound. So it's just kind of like neato, but, you know, oh well. Here's a type called Magneto that's supposed to emulate sort of vintage tape decks where they would have multiple heads and you could get a sort of a fake reverb sound that's really quick delays. If you just play sustained chords, it's kind of hard to tell that it's not just reverb, but you can hear those individual echoes. That's kind of, again, kind of neat, but I can't imagine ever really using that. Here's non-linear, which is supposed to be like a backwards reverb. Again, for me, kind of meh. It's cool, but I can't imagine really using it. Okay, and then here's one other one. It's called Trashy, and it's a spring reverb algorithm. This one I could maybe imagine using if I was kind of trying to get a surf kind of sound. Right, it really does a nice job of emulating that real trashy spring reverb sound that you hear, you know, old Dick Dale recordings and 007 soundtracks and stuff like that. So that one's pretty cool. Again, the gigs that I do, I'm very rarely ever trying to authentically emulate that sound, but I thought that was a particularly cool one. So that was the Strymon BigSky. Hope that everybody got an earful of expansive symphonic reverb, and I hope that you had fun and that you will come back for another one. Next episode, we're going to explore the glorious hologram microcosm made in
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Isn't it?